Good evening. This is Eric Miscoll with EMS Now. This is Eric Miscoll Show. We're here in San Diego at IPC Apex 2020 and gathered some colleagues together just to discuss Mexico, actually, and the business going on down there. Before we get into the discussion, let's introduce who we have. Our victims for this show are Ramon Hernandez with Co-Young,
Yes.
Ivan Romo with SmarTsol, and as always, the lovely Phil Stoten with Scoop. Welcome all. This is intended to be a conversation, so we'll kick around some ideas. Feel free to take it wherever you wish to. I like the conversation about tequila before this, by the way, so I think that's always worth talking about. But I wanted to kick this off, and kind of the big gorilla in the room out here at the show has been what's been going on in China. And I don't want to talk about the coronavirus, poorly named, we all think. There's a lot of issues that have impacted China over the last many years that potentially have had a benefit for Mexico, right? I mean, people think of the coronavirus, but we think about with the changes over there, with the labor rates going up over there. They've had problems before, right? And I think Mexico has benefited in some cases from that, and Mexico has grown and has remained, and especially Guadalajara, one of the best places to manufacture electronics on the planet. So I guess I'd just like to kind of throw that out and see, what are you guys experiencing down there? How are you viewing kind of not the coronavirus specifically, but the business from China coming back to Mexico?
So, yeah, the business coming back to Mexico, that's a reality. So since last year, we saw some investments in one of the big EMS for Guadalajara. In the case of the coronavirus, I would say we're being cautious. One thing that could be beneficial, if we can say that, is that after the Lunar New Year, they're going to stop manufacturing in China for like another 2 weeks. So maybe that could increase the manufacturing in Mexico to absorb that capacity that is not happening right now in China.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
And when I look at it, Eric, the thing that you didn't mention there was tariffs and the trade wars, and that's been a big challenge for China, as we've seen, and this current shutdown is part of the issue. But for me, it's a recognition that you can't have all your eggs in one basket. If you're going to have a global manufacturing footprint and you need some low-cost region in there, it doesn't make sense for it to be just one. It makes sense to have, something maybe in the Americas for the Americas, something in perhaps Eastern Europe for Europe, something in China perhaps for some of the Asian market. We're starting to see a more rational approach to the distribution and manufacturing. Is that something you see, Ivan?
Yes, I'm fully agree that it makes sense to do that new distribution scenario of the manufacturing around the world. The relationship between Mexico and United States is still stronger than before. And we see a lot of visits of the OEMs who left Mexico 10, 20 years ago to move 100% of their manufacturing to Asia. They are right now visiting all the big EMS companies in Mexico. So we see that in the middle of this year will be a lot of new product launch in most of the regions for Mexico, based on those big OEMs who left many years ago.
Yeah, and both of you guys have seen a lot of equipment investment in the region. The region's really geared up, and we mentioned Guadalajara, particularly Guadalajara. There's a huge amount of really good quality capacity there now. Yes,
the companies have some extra capacities ready to be offered. We began talking about the coronavirus. I mean, we expect a couple of weeks delay in some of the components coming from that region. But, Mexico is being prepared with at least 10% extra capacity since last year, being ready for the 5G product increase or for the new OEMs coming.
Yeah, and Ramon, that's not just capacity, that's really smart, intelligent manufacturing capacity, isn't it?
Right, yeah, so they need to be prepared. I mean, as Ivan mentioned, having extra equipment, having all the supply chains ready, to this increase of production that is going to be needed.
But the fact will remain that most of the component supply base will still be sourced out of the China, right? So if you can't get it, right? Having all the equipment and the capacity is. Hold on. We can edit that. So my point being is with the component supply base, that's still a challenge because I remember it's been a few years since I looked at this, but the absorption of electronic components in Mexico, 90+% was being imported in from China. So you still have that challenge. So is there anything changing within the Mexican industry are there component suppliers developing down there? Yeah.
I haven't seen that change. I mean, I think the price is still the same. Most of the components are coming from Asia, from China, and I think it will remain the same. So definitely we can have a major impact in the manufacturing if that's the case.
As long as the supply chain keeps feeding the parts to come over.
Right, Mexico has one of the largest power device manufacturing for cellular phones around the world. Is located in Mexico. But at this moment, it's a good opportunity for the semi-industry to take a look at what Mexico is doing, what Mexico is capable, and to do more investment. Because the current PCB assembly is huge, and of course, the next saving opportunity for this industry is to relocate the manufacturing of the semiconductors into the country.
Yeah. And it may well be that this is just the challenge to do it, but I also think with there was concern over NAFTA, and now you have the new agreement, so that's kind of been settled and tidied away, and we can see this long-term strong bond and relationship within all the North American regions. So I think that's hugely valuable. Was there a hiatus when that was being negotiated, and is the new, what is it, the USMCA agreement, is that positive, or Telmec? Yeah.
Yes, we don't see any negative impact for the electronic assembly in Mexico. We see a lot of benefits. Basically, most of the terms for this industry will remain the same. So it's the good news that we can share with everybody. And of course, if the companies in the United States needs to bring machines or huge components from China, there is the duty, the 15%. That way to avoid that is doing that production in Mexico.
So what do you think, to pick up on the USMCA, TEMEC, what's the impact going to be now on Mexico with that? You say generally positive, but there may be some things that could be challenging, right? I mean, I think within that agreement, it's going to strengthen some of the labor unions, which ones predict that the labor rates will go up and maybe those become a little more competitive, where it's been very steady and very positive for many years. Right. There may be some impact there, and then the question is also, will the government enact policies in line with that to kind of for the future? So what are you seeing on the ground? How are those issues?
I think from my point of view, it will remain the same. It will remain to be flat. I don't see too much issues, too much changes with the new TEMEC being signed, because production always has been steady in Mexico. Mm-hmm. We see another factors like automotive, for instance, last year that we saw a slowdown. So these other factors are the ones that I see that affect more in the Mexico manufacturing area. Mm-hmm. But for the TEMEC, I don't see a major problem.
Okay. When you talk about the salary in the TEMEC, there are some requests to increase the minimum salary in Mexico, and the government last year increased the minimum salary. But that is just a reference, because most of the operators or employees in our industry, their salaries are not related to the minimum salary in Mexico. It's independent, and that has been always 3 or 4 times more than the minimum salary rate that the government established. So, of course, year over year, the people in this industry get a salary increase. There is a lot of competition, always trying to have the best people on board. Mm-hmm. So that's why the companies are trying to keep good salaries for all the staff and production in general. But that government regulations are not really related or what is in the real life in the electronic assembly industry.
Interesting.
Okay. Sorry, what I was interested in the last couple of times I've been to Guadalajara is we've seen a lot of development in terms of digital transformation. You've seen a lot going on. with companies like yourself putting more intelligence in the line. And to my surprise, we've seen some of the big companies actually pilot these programs in places like Guadalajara. That's, to me, that's a real indictment of the success and the talent that you have down there. Is that something you see as a growing demand from your customers?
Yes, a lot. Actually, that's what we were talking in the booth before. We see a lot of the EMS manufacturing OEMs doing global evaluations in Guadalajara, doing the Industry 4.0, one-man operation, and then from Mexico, they expand worldwide.
Yeah.
So it's been, I would say, a lot of, for Coyon, a lot of the new customers, new initiative, all the software that we are developing is being tested in Mexico. So that speaks pretty well about the level that we have in engineering, with the engineering labor in Mexico. And I think that that's something we should be proud of.
Well, it's really, for me, it's fascinating that Mexico is the early adopter in terms of industrial Internet of Things, in terms of Industry 4.0, and that, you know, it's seen as a place that you can really test those. And I think that's partly because you're running so close to capacity, and there's volume going through that allows you to add value with that digital transformation.
Right, and you know, right now, information technology, the management of the information is the key for success in this industry. So basically, the EMS companies are sharing the information with the customers in real time. So the customer is in UK or Canada or United States, just with the cell phone, can see what is the current status of the production, what is the GL trend, if there is a line down situation, why, in real time. So no need to have the weekly reports as used to be a few years ago.
Yeah.
It's a real-time communication right now, and it's in place in most of the companies.
Yeah,
so
it's huge, isn't it?
it's huge, and we do similar situations. If there is a line down situation with one of our customers, we don't need to show up at the first approach with the customer. Just we need to go to the computer, do a remote connection, trying to solve the situation remotely. If not, we will send the technical support within a few minutes.
Yeah.
But of course, the transformation of the information management is helping to have much better efficiency in production now.
Yeah, and that gives you the traceability, and that's something that's important to some industries. For example, the automotive industry, which you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. No, and let's pick up on that, on the automotive, and you mentioned that too, kind of last year there was a downturn automotive, but that was also because of the shift to the electric, right, the e-vehicles, and that's becoming a big push.
Yes.
So and automotive is an important sector for Mexico, obviously. So what's happening there? What are you seeing?
We saw a slowdown about, I think it was 7% in Mexico for automotive, but we saw an increase in industrial, for instance. So new technologies like 5G, we saw some improvement there, and I think this year especially it will be bigger for the industrial sector, for the 5G connection that is needed. Something that we need to see is how these electrical cars are affecting the supply chain. So now we need to look, okay, before it was a mechanical transmission, now everything is electronics. So we need to see these different sectors.
In addition, the IoT gears are growing so much, so home automation, that type of business segments are a growing market for us in Mexico.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think we need to wrap up soon, but I'm kind of just curious as we get through this year and we try and figure out what our 2020 vision is going forward. What do you think are the biggest opportunities and challenges for Mexico right now? And I'm going to throw Ivan in at the deep end and ask him first, and then maybe Ramon afterwards.
Well, I think that the biggest challenge is how to ramp up as faster as needed, according with the new free trade agreement and according with the technology transition to 5G.
Okay.
That is the biggest challenge, how to keep in control the process with a huge amount of product that will be released very soon.
That's exciting because that's both the biggest challenge, but potentially your biggest opportunity as well.
Yes, one of the biggest challenges I see, we were talking a lot of the new software development and everything. But now what I see, the customer gets a lot of information. So we need to work very closely with the customer so they can use all these tools that right now are available, but sometimes they have so many tools that it's difficult for them how to utilize these tools. So we need to focus on training the customer and being consultant with the customers and help them grow with these new technologies that are emerging.
Yeah, so you figure out what the end game is and then design the software ecosystem and the data to make better decisions rather than just supply data because we can.
Now, I do want to remember when we spoke to you last year, I remember you were a big advocate for saying what Mexico needs for the next step is its own OEM, its own brand, right? But within electronics specifically, right? So, and I think it looked like it was going there years ago, and then we had the big hoopla with going to China and everything. But how is that now? Where do you see that coming? Is it developing? Is there the opportunity?
I don't see too much, to be honest. I think it's still something that we're missing. Mm-hmm. We see a lot of initiatives for sure, and some companies, SmarTsol, for instance, they can support some local customers. So that's something we are trying to do as Mexicans, right, to help each other. But I see still pretty challenging comparing with Mexico, for instance, with Brazil, which in Brazil we see a lot of small OEMs and local factories. I think over here is more corporate and big EMS than local factories.
And is that because is it a stifling of innovation, or is it the challenge of innovation becoming industrialized, and what's slowing that down?
No, innovation, there is a lot of entrepreneur people with great products. We believe that there is not financial support for local companies in Mexico.
Okay.
Small guys need government funds or good credit line from the banks, and it's not easy to have access to those. So most of the time, distributors like SmarTsol needs to provide up to 12 months credit plans for local shops, trying to help them to be at the level of the big CMs.
Yeah, and then Ivan, you've got to gamble on which ones are going to make it.
Yeah, I mean, we can support 3 or 4 projects per year, right? But it's limited.
Yes.
But that is the major problem that we see with the local companies.
Yeah, and I think that's true with OEMs as well. You know, Silicon Valley is awash with venture capital. Guadalajara isn't, and you know, you've both got plug and play, but you only have to visit them both to see that it's a completely different scale.
Completely. Okay. We're going to wrap. Any final comments, anything that we didn't talk about that you feel compelled that you want to tell the world?
I think we need to keep doing the good work that we have been doing, and just to see and finding different strategies. Now we need to see like macro marketing instead of just doing like local strategies for marketing, things like that. So we need to see more the macro environment to
I think that's huge.
Successful.
I think that's huge, Ramon. And when you see companies like yourselves coming together to promote Mexican manufacturing generally, I think you tell a great story, and I think the SMTA has done a nice job of that in Mexico, and it's starting to build momentum, but you need to go to work on that every day.
Yeah, basically to say thank you to you, Phil and Eric, for giving the opportunity to talk about Mexico, to share with everybody around the world that Mexico is a safe place for investment, a very secure place to visit, and with the best people, with a lot of experience in electronic manufacturing, the best capacity installed, and always ready for growth.
Yeah, and the door's always open. And I lived in Guadalajara for a while. Yeah. It's a fabulously safe,
absolutely
wonderful environment to live in, and just up the road from Tequila, as we discussed earlier. So, a nice place to be.
Good. Well, thank you all for coming and joining today. We appreciate it, and we'll keep the conversation going. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.